So, Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Hey, good to see you. Right, so we're not going to cover this product, but this is going to be my intro. It is a very old, and to be honest, it's looking a bit weary, Jetboil, which I must have got quite a lot of years ago now, about 15 or so years ago. As I highlighted to you before we spoke, it's even got a nice increased capacity way of drinking, the courtesy of the mouse that burrowed into it, which is when I was on El Cap. But anyway, this was very much Jetboil's USP at the time. It's like the stove, the cooking system, everything fits within it. You pop that in your bag and it provides this like bomb-proof, robust, and really quick way of cooking things. Now, we're not going to talk about my skanky Jetboil. We're going to talk about the Stash, but I thought that was just a nice social intro to the brand and how the Stash maybe differs from that a little.
Yeah, so I think you bring up a great point, and that's how I was first introduced to the brand as well, as the old PCS, which was the personal cook system. And really, when Jetboil was founded back in 2004, that's what we set out to do, is to create a warm, hot meal anywhere, anytime. And for you, and I also had a similar case, the mice also like it too. That's what we changed. We kind of revolutionized how to cook on the trail with, like you said, the compact all-in-one nesting components of the personal cook system. Now, that PCS eventually evolved into the Flash with a few updates over the years. And so the Flash has become our bread and butter. It's become our number one selling unit, and really by far, in a way, the most popular Jetboil. But what we found over the years is that, people were a little hesitant when they were going on, lighter weight trips to bring their Flash or to bring any stove in general. And so they were really making hard choices and sacrifices when it came to meals on the trail because their stove or the stove system was just too heavy and they didn't really see the need or the desire to carry it. So after reviewing all that, our goal at Jetboil is to really provide a warm meal anywhere, anytime, regardless of how long or how short you're going. And so that really was the inspiration. Is how do we make that same complete stove system at a much lighter weight? And that's really where the Stash inception came from. And we challenged our engineers to cut that Flash weight, which is currently 13 ounces, or I think it's around 370 grams, and really cut almost 50% of the weight and still provide that fast, efficient Jetboil performance.
And that's the really tricky thing to do, I think, isn't it? Because like once you start cutting back on the size, you're not going to be able to fit in a canister and the sort of burner unit and, anything else. It's a really difficult thing to achieve. But I mean, you've obviously managed it because here we are with the product that I think you're about to bring out.
Yeah, it took us a while. It took us 3 years. We did a ton of consumer research, a ton of field testing, and to your point, like this is the Flash, right? So it contains everything you need. So you have your lid. It stores your fuel canister. Throwing things now. It stores your fuel canister. You've got your burner, as well as your fuel stabilizer, which is really helpful for uneven performances out on the trail. And so what we were looking at is, okay, how can we minimize these components? How can we really take, a lightweight approach to this and still provide the patented Jetboil flux ring technology, which helps you carry less fuel? And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And what we came up with is the Stash.
Which looks, it's hilarious, really, isn't it? When you look at it side by side, it's like, it's actually quite incredible that it comes barely to half height, and yet within it, you've got the stove, and I believe you'll also have a canister in there as well.
Yeah, so what our engineering team did is they really utilized all the space. And so within the lid, you have the fuel canister that locks in. So what that does is, one, it allows the fuel canister up and out of the cook pot. Number one, to keep your cook pot nice and clean. All the time we're putting this down in the dirt, grass, grit, grind, and that eventually goes into your cook pot. So by really creating this locking mechanism in the lid that solves against that. And also gives the fuel canister a great place to store. And then inside, we have the burner, which everything on the burner was really designed for maximized storage. And so a little bit hard to see, but there's the curvature on the legs that follow the inside of the cook pot. So really allows that to tuck out of the way. And then as well as the fuel stabilizers in there too. And everything it's only got one little tricky. So we put it on here a few times, but there's really only one good way to pack it. So with the burner tucked along the side and then the fuel canister offset, that really allows you to keep everything nice and neat.
The burner on the bottom or top, and then the opposing end is where the canister fits in.
Exactly.
So tell us more about the ring system at the base as well, because one of the things you mentioned there, which again is something that I don't think loads of people maybe realize, is that if you have a conventional tower style burner, that's going to kick out a load of heat, but it's going to be subject to the wind, but it's also going to be subject to the fact that a lot of heat is going to be lost to the, three outer edge of the pan that you're cooking on.
Yeah, so common misconception is if you have higher output, you have more power, you boil quicker. And that's not always the case, because in a normal conventional flat bottom pot or pan, only about 30% of that energy from the flame is going directly into the pot, and 65, 70% of that is going out into the atmosphere. So you're losing that, and you're essentially heating up the air that's not being directed toward the pot or the pan. And so what Jetboil created was the flux ring technology. And so this is an extremely long piece of aluminum that's been coiled up that allows you to capture almost 70% of that flame. And so with the heat transfer from this aluminum coil, that then goes directly into the cook pot, which means you're capturing more heat, which means you're using less fuel. And so when we talk about weight and size, that also has to play into your fuel consumption, because with the flux ring technology, capturing more heat, you're using about half as much fuel as a standard flat bottom pot or pan. And to your point, weather does play into the effect of all canister stoves, regardless if it's unregulated or regulated. And there's some great tips and tricks out there that we can teach consumers on how to best improve your fuel performance in cold weather or high elevation.
So I think walls of rucksacks to stop wind from coming through. And I've certainly used the Jetboil on, well, for me as well, aside from El Capitan was an issue in terms of just making sure that we didn't carry up too much or too little fuel. So using whatever fuel you have efficiently is key. The other example for me is on Alpine North Faces in winter where it's really cold. Your issue there is, again, you need to use a lot of fuel, but really inefficiently because of the cold. So you need something to make it more efficient as a result.
Yeah. So one way that is a really easy solution if you're in cold weather. So the fuel canister is always going to be dictated by the pressure inside. And the pressure inside can be because of how much or how little fuel is inside the canister. And it can also be affected by the temperature outside. And so we always try to start with a warm fuel canister, and warm, we mean, keep it close to your body. If it's super cold out, put it in your sleeping bag at night, because the colder the fuel canister starts, the quicker that performance is going to drop. And so as the liquid inside the canister turns to a gas, that chemical reaction cools the canister. So as the canister gets colder, the pressure drops and works harder. So one really simple way to go ahead, jump in.
I think I was just about to ask exactly what you're about to say here. So I'm interested to hear this. I should have never interrupted you.
Sure. So one simple way is, if you have a cup or a pan or anything, if you have water of any, it's water, it's liquid, it's going to be, because it's actually a liquid form, it's not going to be freezing. It will be 32 degrees C, or Forgive me, I forget what that.
Don't worry. I
Okay.
never ever ask anyone from America to convert into Fahrenheit or Celsius, and in the same turn, never get me to understand Fahrenheit. But above what we'd say is 0 degrees Celsius. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So if you have liquid in this cup and you put your fuel canister in there, that's always going to maintain the gas canister at that 32 degrees C. And so that's always going to, regardless of how long you're using it or how short you're using it, it's going to keep it the same consistent temperature because, that there's liquid in there and that's 32 degrees. Otherwise, that fuel canister is going to continue to drop and performance will suffer.
Well, you learn something new every day. What I was going to say is the thing I've sometimes been guilty of is in the name of laziness, you'll just put your fuel canister down on like the snow or something like that or cooler ground, and it'll inevitably mean that the temperature will rapidly drop. And as you say, the efficiency of something like that is, drastically reduced. So
exactly.
Anyway.
So in that case, you're further cooling the canister and essentially worsening the performance. So keep that in mind next time. Try to keep it out of the snow.
Note to self, stop being so lazy, I think is the good moral. So going back to the stash, what sort of boil times can we expect out of it?
And so what we communicate is, in our lab, standard temperature is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's really baseline for Jetboil. Our flash performs a little bit better than that when we launched it a few years ago, but all of our other systems, the Zip, the Micromo, the Minimo, the Sumo, they all have around a 2 minute and 30 second boil time for a half liter of water. So Stash is very much in line with that. So half a liter of water. This is a 0.8 liter cook pot. And there's actually gradient lines inside here that will show you 2 cups or 500 milliliters, which is standard cup of coffee or standard, for standard amount of water for a dehydrated meal.
But it's impressive it manages to do that, because the next question I was going to come on to is one of weight, because of the fact that it can, you'd expect a larger, I guess, burner to get a better time, but to go lighter weight and still achieve that is quite remarkable.
Yeah, and that really all comes down to obviously the burner output, but then the fluxing technology of capturing that energy coming off the burner and harnessing it directly right into the bottom of the cook pot.
That's great. And I guess the other thing to say as well is, because of the design of the burner unit as well, you could use this with other pans as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we did, and I should probably go into the full details of the stash. We keep jumping around here. But
too much to discuss. Too much to discuss within it's such a good tangent that we're going off on. It's hard to stop.
So with the stash, you're going to get a single burner. And what we have in here is we looked at trying to cut weight as anywhere possible without sacrificing performance. And so we did look at making this whole thing titanium, but the weight to the performance ratio didn't match up to our standards. And so there are components of this stove. And so you'll see this top and bottom cup that is made out of titanium. The legs itself are made out of stainless steel because we know that's going to perform stronger, longer in high temperatures. And so, but what you see and what you touched on is that we have these little notches in here, which one serve as, this right here serves as a self-centering for the stash cook pot itself. So you can see, right where it's centered, it's not going to go anywhere. It's really stable. But then what it also allows you to do is that you can use this for any other pot or pan that you may have. And so it really provides some versatility across, your adventure. And for your climbing, for you, we also included, there's a third notch right in here, you can see, and that's for our hanging kit. And so if you don't necessarily have a level ground to put it on, this does work with our hanging kit as well. So you can hang it, while you're climbing up the side of El Capitan if you really wanted to, or any other instance where you may not have a really level space or ground.
It's always amazing when we're talking through product with people, and I haven't got how many minutes we've been on for now, but just how much you can kind of say about such a, well, I guess it's a minimalist product, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was the whole point, is that there was really an unmet need from consumers out there today for a lighter weight stove. And, we don't want people to have to sacrifice, cold soaking or eating jerky or, cold coffee. Not necessarily the best after you had an extremely strenuous day. And people really look forward to that warm, hot or meal as a reward, or that warm cup of coffee in the morning to really get themselves going. And so we wanted to be able to provide a solution that solved against that. And that's really what the Stash is here to do, is provide that lightweight solution that's super compact and super lightweight, but really efficient and has really high performance.
Well, thanks for taking us through this, Stash, Sarah. And thanks also for the water trick, because that is something I had never even heard of, which either makes me very naive or, yeah, it's fantastic. Thanks ever so much.
Absolutely. If there's any other tips or tricks too, our engineering team they're super accessible and they love talking shop. So if you guys have any questions or comments, like, we're all for it. We eat, breathe, sleep, Jetboil and cooking. And so we're all ears for you guys.
Thanks ever so much, Sarah. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.